Hi, in this reset I have made the decision to change Raiding Guild, and I thought I'd throw out a vlog on the reasons why, but also I thought the process of me looking for another guild, which isn't complete yet, I've only just started, but I thought although the first part may be of interest to some people, and I'm going to vlog about that, and of course you know what I'm like, when it's sort of these sort of things to camera, I've got actually more detailed notes than I usually do when I do it to camera. It's usually just a few bullet points. This is much more than that, but at the same time it's not a script. So I'm going to go off topic every now and then. Well, not off topic, hopefully, but off on a tangent. But at the same time, some of you might be thinking, well, I don't care about that. I don't care about you. What I want to know is, what is the process? Because actually, I'd be interested in that because I'm looking for a guild at the time as well. So what I've done is, the first part, I'm just going to go through first of all. And then the second part, which may be of more instructional use to you, is there's a link to it at the top. You can click on that and that will take you there. And also, I've put a timestamp in the description below, so you can click on that and go straight to the more instructional bit where I'll be much more on message. So, in terms of sort of reasons why, now, first thing to note is that everyone has their own objectives in any game that requires preparation and commitment. And I think some people view the game through the prism of their own objectives. So sometimes they can't quite work out why someone does something that they wouldn't necessarily do in the same situation. But we have to bear in mind we all play the game for different reasons. Now, I think what's important is when you're thinking about a guild, you're thinking of joining a guild, it's a good idea to write down what is it you actually want. Write down all the desirable qualities of your raiding experience and the guild that you'll need to join to do that. Then what you have to do is you have to decide what is most important, what your top priorities, and be prepared to sacrifice the rest. Now, this is something I don't think I always did. If I think back to my very first serious raiding guild, I thought it was fantastic. To this day, I can't really criticise it. Until, of course, the point I decided to leave. At that point, it was no longer good. That's when things started to change in a way that I didn't find acceptable. But up until that point, it was a good old long time, most of vanilla. I was very happy with it. I was very happy with the way it was run. I had no real qualms with any aspect of it. And then when I joined another guild, I think what I started to do was to look at ways in which it wasn't as good. And that sort of preys on your mind a little bit. You think, well, that's not as good as in the last guild, is it? And it's not as good as in the last guild. Even though overall, surely the guild is better because you've joined it from the other one. I mean, there were little things like, you know, they had a DKP system, for example, but sometimes when people got loot, they forgot to take the DKP off that person's tally and stuff like that. And there were all sorts of fiddling going on. Or they would just straight out not let you loot. There was a group of people in it, a small group of people, but a group of people in the leadership who I sort of termed the untouchables because they could basically do whatever they wanted. And, you know, it culminated for me in a situation where one of them ninja looted an item in a raid outside of the normal guild raid off another member. And I kicked up a right stink about it. But yes, of course, I'm nitpicking. I realise that now. But anyway, yes, I mean, of course, it should be absolutely fine that people can treat each other like shit in the same guild. So yeah, I didn't stay there too long. Certainly, at the end of vanilla, I sort of left that guild. But the point is that you have to sort of decide on what are your priorities and realise that you're not going to find a guild that ticks all the boxes. So you have to decide which are most important. Now, for me, it's playing a Retribution Paladin. That's going to cost me. Playing in progress raiding. That's going to cost me as well. So I sort of have to be prepared to sacrifice a lot, including world ranks if necessary, which is likely to be very necessary. And I will happily do that. Well, I say happily. Happily is the wrong word, but I will. Because for me anyway, the world rank is largely an arbitrary number. I'm sort of aware that you can think of, oh, you want to be in the top 100 or the top 200 or top 1,000 or something. It doesn't make necessarily any sense to say you're aiming for a particular number. And the reason for that is because it's not just down to you what world rank you get. It's down to others as well. For example, let's say there are double the number of raiding guilds at a particular level, say Mythic, raiding in Legion than they were in WoD. Well, all of a sudden your top 100 in WoD is actually like your top 200, the same equivalent, in Legion. Well, I'm not saying it is double, but we don't know. Or if it was suddenly halved, then actually the top 100 isn't as good as it used to be, is it? And then you could have a situation where you actually might do as well as you did in WoD, but a load of guilds do better because they sat down during the drought and they said, how can we make ourselves better? And they did that, and they jump ahead of you. And it's not that you're doing worse, but your world rank might look like it is. So it's a little bit arbitrary to aim for a world rank. So what do I aim for? I want to complete content while it's current. And when I say while it's current, what I mean is the next bit of content hasn't come out. So in terms of Emerald Nightmare, I expect to clear it before Trial of Valor comes out. And that's not that long away. Because even though Emerald Nightmare seems to be a really quick instance, it's not going to be that long before the next one's out. And then that needs to be cleared, which hopefully shouldn't be too bad. There's only 3 bosses before Nighthold comes out, except sort of Christmas will be in the way, so I don't know. And we don't know exactly when Nighthold's coming out. So that's what I mean. That's for me more important because the world rank is it's what it is. You get what rank you get. It's not just down to you. Now, this event, you know, sort of having to look for a new guild for me has sort of been in the making for a little while. I sort of sometime before Legion came out, I sort of noted that the guild that I was in now had a really large roster, like really, really large. Now, for me, a roster is something that ensures that you will always have a raid group going. Yes, it needs to be balanced, because if a particular class role combination has an ability that makes a mockery of a particular mechanic, you sort of want it in your raid. Okay? But that's it, and you can get that without, you know, loads and loads. What you don't want is a load of people on the bench. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that, really. I mean, it's not good for the player, obviously, because players don't like that. But it's also, I would argue, not good for the raid, because the problem is, if you have a large bench, then you've got, first of all, you're cycling your gear around too many people. So your overall item level drops down. And you can have a third of your gear. You've gone farming all your farm bosses that week, and a third of that gear can potentially be on the bench. Well, what's the point of that? And then if it's not, and you're not cycling it around those people, then it's almost like from the start you're saying, you're not going to be in our progress, so we're not going to go to your loot. And it's like you're not even giving them a chance, because how can they compete without the loot? You need the gear to be able to do the output. So it's one or the other, and both of them are bad. The other thing is, you want a core raid team. You ideally want as many people as possible to be in on every progress fight. We can see this in professional sport. If anyone follows a professional, I mean, I follow football, for example, you sometimes see when new managers take over a club and they're not doing very well. One common criticism that's levelled at them is they don't even know their own team. In other words, they keep playing a completely different set of players every game, and they don't settle because they're not used to working with each other. I mean, there is a reason why, you know, in team sports, these teams go off and do like team building stuff every now and then. Yes, I know people in your work might get you to do that in the office every now and then, a load of rubbish that is. But when a team's doing it, when an actual team needs to do it, that's a good thing, because you're bonding, you're learning to get on with each other, you're learning to work with each other, you're more effective. And yes, in professional football, I hear you say, yes, but they have a bench as well. They do have quite a large bench. The reason for that is not so that they can cycle around each game, it's so that they can occasionally take people off to prevent injury, to prevent their actual core players getting injured. When it comes to the big games, the big things, they want their main players on there. And then you think to yourself, so why would people be on a bench in a professional game? It's obvious. They're usually young, they're developing, they know that what they're trying to do is break into that first team, and they're getting paid for it. In World of Warcraft, we have to live much more in the moment, of course. We're not thinking to ourselves, oh, it's okay, because it's a developmental process and I'm going to crack into the core team at some point in the future. No. Every tier is the here and now. Every tier could be your last tier in the game. And also, it's not a profession, it's a leisure activity. And we also have to think about that in terms of other things as well. I mean, you know, I think some people, when they're looking for the guild they're trying to get in, put too much importance on it. You've got to think to yourself, well, it's not like a job. You're not going to lose your house if you don't get into a guild straight away. So, you know, make sure you pick the right one. And, you know, if I talk about core raid teams, I think the highest world rank I ever got, and it's very difficult to compare ranks in different expansions, because if you've got different number of guilds playing at a particular level, like I said, it means less. But the highest world rank I ever got to was in TBC with a guild where it was 25-man raiding and there were 30 people in the roster. And what it actually worked out as, there was 20 of us in the core raid team. Like, there was 20 of us that were just always there on progress. It's just all there was to it. There's no decision to be made. We were just always in there on progress. And then of the other 10, 5 of them were in as well. And then you think to yourself, okay, so was that like 10 second-class citizens? No, it wasn't. What it was is the other 10 were people who couldn't commit very much. The minimum requirements were 90% attendance, although those of us in the core raid team was basically 95+% attendance. Then as now, working as a teacher, 4 or 5 days a year, I have to do an evening event, whether it's a parents' evening or something like that. Usually coincides with the raid day, can't be helped. But the rest of the time I'd be there. Whereas these other guys, it'd be more like 70 to 80% attendance, which basically means they'd usually miss a raid a week or something like that. So it actually got to the point where you don't have 5 people on the bench. You usually just had 1, because on any given night of those 10 people, only 5 or 6 of them would be available. You always knew you had enough to have the 25 men. That never didn't happen. Otherwise, we would have recruited, of course. But yeah, what it meant was, in actual fact, all we did was take the people who were there. There might be 1 or 2 people who then had to sit out accordingly. But they also were fine with that, because they knew that. They knew they couldn't commit, so they knew that was the situation they were in. The benefit for them was that, you know, once it was on farm, after a week or 2, they'd be in for the kill anyway. So they'd still be killing it a lot quicker than the vast majority of people in the world. That sort of system works fine. That's okay. Now, I mean, some people, I mean, now, of course, it's different. It's different state. I can't really compare a system then to now exactly, but just to get the idea of the benefit of a core raid team. Now, some people are mostly concerned with beating content in a timely manner. That is their main concern. And they're not as bothered if they're there for the progress or not. They probably want to be. I can't understand people who don't want to be. Some don't, actually, but most do. But they're sort of happy if they're not, as long as they're brought in a couple of weeks later, so they're still getting the kill before loads of other people, for example, because the alternative is to do what I'm doing and drop well down, where I'll be killing it a long time after even I would have done had I stayed as like a bencher. But for me, that's not what it's about. Like, if I've not progressed on a boss and killed it at the same time with everyone else in that raid also having killed it for the first time at the same time, as far as I'm concerned, I've not killed a boss. Like, at the moment, I could say I'm 5 out of 7 mythic. But in reality, I'm 4, because I've only progressed and killed 4. I killed another one tonight, the spider boss. But I've arsed it up completely. Didn't do any of the progress. Not used to the timings. Don't know when to use my things properly. Completely cocked it up. Died at the end even. Yeah, I've killed it. I've got the achievement for it. Don't consider myself to have killed it. I won't be putting out a kill video for it, because I haven't progressed and killed it. Now, you can't have it all, of course. This is really important. I insist on playing a particular class role combination, and especially as that particular class role combination is frequently out of favour, then, you know, I would say with increasingly out of date utility, but, you know, that's another thing, then obviously I need to sacrifice something. I also insist on being a progress raider. It's the only reason I spend. I mean, you've got to think about it. There's a lot of preparation goes into being a mythic raider of any kind. And there's a lot. The actual progress itself doesn't take that long if you do it at reasonable pace. It's not that long. You spend far more time getting ready for it. And if you think about it, in the first month of Legion, I had to work as well. So I was working, raiding. I didn't have very much time to do a lot on the YouTube channel. In fact, I was just throwing out things that were quite quick and easy to edit, some of which I'd done in advance as well before Legion actually came out. And so, yeah, I've been spending, I haven't even cooked myself a meal, or I have now, but for the first month I hadn't even cooked myself a meal. I was basically eating microwave meals or like sandwiches, quick things to make, or takeaway. I didn't even go grocery shopping. I was as I still am now, I've got into the habit of it now, I need to stop. But just getting my groceries delivered. So I get them delivered at a particular hour when I know I'm not going to be, like when there's not going to be enough people up for me to do like organised PvE. But I'll still be on the game until I hear the knock on the door, then go down, grab it all in quick. I've still got, I don't even put it away. Like the stuff that has to go in the fridge goes in the fridge, the stuff that has to go in the freezer goes in the freezer. But like tins of stuff, I've still got tins in my lounge. In front of my telly, I've got tins of spaghetti because I haven't even spent the time putting them away in a cupboard because it's back upstairs and into something else or waiting for a Mythic Plus dungeon group or something like that. I don't do all that to then sort of be riding around Dalaran listening to other people progress. And it's not like I haven't done progress. I progressed on 4 bosses, which is not bad, and it's better than some people have been able to do. But it's just not for me. I need to progress on all of them. And I will progress on all of them at a much lower level and go at a slower pace than not at all. Now, that's not to say that I will just drop down completely. But I mean, it is quite a harsh thing. It's not actually been a problem in the guild I'm in now, having to listen to the progress. There was a bad situation in a guild I was in through most of Hellfire Citadel. I remember in particular Velhari, and I wasn't in for Velhari to begin with, so it was also, it's like getting to a point now, like, for most of World of Warcraft, I've just never been left out. In fact, if I go through World of Warcraft missing bosses, when I've been in a guild that's killed a boss and I've not been on it. The first one was Firemore in Tier 2. That was because I had a parents' evening. The same thing with Ebonrock, actually, because they killed Firemore. I'd progressed on it, but then they killed it when I wasn't there, parents' evening. And Ebonrock was a piece of piss, so they killed that as well. So I came home, but I was still brought in then for Flamecore. What else have I missed? It's actually quite hard to think of them. The next one I missed was Illidan at the end of towards the end of TBC. And again, it was the same thing. I was there for progress, so it's not that I was benched. I was there for progress, and I don't think it was a penalty. I think that was an open event, but it doesn't matter. Work, at any rate, meant that I missed the kill. Boo-hoo. That's annoying. Next one you have to... Now, you've got to bear in mind, like, when Wrath came out, I stopped playing at the end of Tier 7 and didn't come back until Dragonstone and Cataclysm. So all that period, I wasn't playing anyway. So obviously no bosses in there. The next one was in Mop, which was Raden. Again, I was there on progress. Now, it wasn't work this time. What happened was I was in on the group. On the night we killed Raden, we were going to have to kill Leishen first. And my internet went... Ugh. So... The latest it was when I was with Virgin, and it's when they used to play silly buggers. It went for like 2 or 3 summers in a row. At a certain time of year, it would just go to shit. And that's exactly what happened. So that was my internet cocking me over there. And then that was pretty much it, up until Hellfire Citadel with a guild. So yeah, I mean, there were a couple of ones I missed. That was because I went on holiday. Okay, that was just me going on holiday. Obviously, I can't be on the boss. I didn't even want... Anyway, I don't go on holiday anymore now. I was with a partner at the time who we had to go on holiday, so... But yeah, Tyrant Velhari. So initially I wasn't in, and then I was, because it wasn't working out. And I sort of knew it would be difficult to justify it, because I knew that while we were progressing, my damage wouldn't look brilliant. But I knew that it would come good at the end, just because I knew the way the fight goes. As such it did. But the problem was... We had a mage, it was a trial mage, who eventually failed the trial. They were hopeless. They were good, really good at damage, but really bad at mechanics. And they were so bad that if they got edict, we just wiped. Straight up wiped. And the raid leader kept chewing this guy out, but didn't bench him. And there were a couple of guys, Death Knights, on the bench. And I'm thinking to myself, why are we not bringing them in? I even said so. Why are we not bringing them in? All the Death Knights aren't very good. It's like, you don't think about the class. This mage isn't very good. Mages might be really good. This mage isn't. We know that if this mage gets this mechanic, and there's a decent chance for it to happen, we're going to wipe. That's a bit crap. And I could imagine these Death Knights listening to this. They're thinking to themselves, hang on a minute, why aren't we being brought in? This guy's failing. He's been given his shot. He's been given loads of shots. He's still cocking up the same thing every time. Can't even click on a gateway. Why the hell are we not in? And I said at the time, this is dreadful. I thought I wouldn't put up with this myself. And I think you have to bear in mind. Now, as a scientist, of course, I know a little bit about Albert Einstein. Now, I have a few choice things to say about him, but I'm not going to slag him off just now. But he said a few decent things as well. One of them was E equals mc squared, but that's not relevant here. Another thing he said is that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. And what he means is that often people will try and read things into data, tables of data or charts or something. Information that just isn't there. It's just not there. But it's a number. Oh, it's a number. It must mean something. And they assign meaning to it that just doesn't exist. Conversely, there are some things that are actually really important, but you can't assign a number to it. And so people say, well, you can't then rank it. Therefore, we're going to ignore it. And this happens in all sorts of walks of life. And the same sort of thing happens here. It's like, yes, Death Knights might not appear overall, if you're looking at the overall DPS rankings, to be all that brilliant. But those are average. These are our particular guys who are actually quite good. This is our mage who is actually a load of shit. Why are we not swapping them round? I mean, I have gone through many, many tiers without even a hint of being benched for progress as a Retribution Paladin. Because, you know, guilds have sort of known that I'm not going to step in shit too often. I'm not going to cock things up twice, hopefully. You know, I'm reasonably reliable. I look up the fights beforehand. I prepare for them, and blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. Okay? Yes, some of them might sometimes wish I'd rolled a mage myself or something more useful, but they just know that the overall combination of player and classes is fine. And as I say, I mean, this was just in that particular guild. And then what happened in another fight, it actually did happen to me. And I'm there sat listening to the same, would you believe it, the same guy, but not only that guy, a few others as well, cocking the same thing up over and over and over again. I'm thinking, why am I not in? And at that point, I decided, well, I said, like with the last ones, I wouldn't put up that if I had to listen to that. And I thought, well, I'm not going to put up with it. So I went. And yeah, I mean, we would, I'm utterly convinced, obviously it's an opinion, can't go back in time and change it and test it scientifically, but I'm utterly convinced that we would have killed that boss much more quickly with the people that can play the mechanics, even if their class wasn't considered to be quite as strong, looking at overall outpost DPS ranks. Because I'll tell you what, if you look at guilds that have now killed, you know, guilds that have killed things reasonably quickly, not necessarily the very top ones, I don't know about that, a lot of their logs are private anyway, but look at the ones who have killed now, because we've got about 100 guilds have cleared the whole thing. If you look at the different compositions for the different fights, I'll bet you can look at some and think, oh, they took one of those classes, or I don't think that did very well. It might be that that particular class doesn't do very well in that fight, but that player obviously bloody well did because they took them. And yeah, and that's been the experience for most of the time. But obviously, I think as well, when you go higher up, you've got more and more good players, like in a lower progress guild. And for many years, I've probably been in a lower progress guild than the one I'm in now. As long as you're better enough than a lot of other players, you're still going to get taken along because the overall package is better. But then I think when you're playing with other players who do play their own class as well as you do yours, and their class is more suited, then of course it's probably a bit inevitable. So when I've been looking for another guild, I'm automatically now tuning out some that are above a certain level, because I'm sort of thinking to myself, what I probably need is that sort of lower level where I can be a better player and drag my class or spec along with it. And the lower down you go, the easier it is. Of course, there is a limit to how low down I will go. Now, the current time, of course, could not be worse for looking for a guild. If I were looking before the summer, you know, as I say, before summer, well, not before summer, during summer, before Legion came out, when I was noting that the current guild had a very large roster, and I was thinking, actually, do you know what? And I actually said as much as well. It would be a lot easier. I could just look for another guild now if this isn't going to pan out. We knew by then how Rec was going to be. It didn't have good or utility. Thinking about the fights we've got coming, it's like, yeah, you can make a case for every now and this particular, like, oh yeah, bot might be useful here. But do you know what? If we've got a protection, like we have a protection paladin and 2 holy paladins, don't really need a 4th bot. Things same with Hand of Freedom, which actually, for the first time in God knows how long, actually does come in useful. but it's not like, it's not a utility that's useful all the time, and it's not a utility that's useful, you know, like the more you have, the better. You can't have too many of them. So in that position, if you've got a prot paladin, especially in a holy paladin, or even if you didn't have either, it's not necessarily that strong. So at that point, I sort of thought to myself, it's probably not going to work out. But I think some people were saying, well, you know, it can shrink down. There might be some people who just leave. But there would have to have been a hell of a lot left to shrink the roster down to something that I sort of consider reasonable, really. Now, so when it comes to, as I say, looking for a guild, it is quite tricky, because what you need is a guild that actually needs me. Now, at that point, you have to think about, there's two reasons for a guild, or what I would think two sensible reasons at any rate, for a guild looking for a new player. One is because they are looking ahead at a fight that has a mechanic that can be abused by a particular class, and they don't have much representation or any of that class in that role. That's not really going to happen for Ret. That's not an issue for Ret. So the second one is they actually need warm bodies. They actually need like another melee or another DPS in general or whatever. Now the thing is, if you look at the level of progress, by definition, any guild with my level of progress has a roster that's all right. So I'm not actually going to find my way into a guild like that. It's not feasible. Now, so again, what you're really wanting to do is to find a guild that's actually struggling a bit because they don't quite have enough players, but they're a diamond in the rough, and suddenly, you know, if they get a couple more, including me, it all works out. That's the ideal. Not easy to spot someone like that, because I say you can't just go past on past experience like how they did in Warlords, because they may not have done very well then, and they may suddenly be doing better now, because like I said before, they may have sat down and gone, this is what we need to do to get better, and they might have done it, and they might actually have a really good plan. Similarly, they might have actually done quite well, and because a few key members have left, particularly if it's a key raid leader, they've not done so well, and they're not going to do so well just because of that. It's really hard to judge. So yeah, mid-tier is a really bad time for finding a new guild. Stunningly bad time. So, in terms of the process now, where I'll try and stay much more on message, for those who may have skipped across and just joined us now, this is the portion that may be of practical help to others as well. So I'm going to go through what I have done so far and what I'm going to do this weekend. Now, the first step is to make your availability known. You don't go straight away looking for a guild and then applying to it. Now, I've got, at this point, I will point out, I am aware that some people, like what have I said about desirable properties and what are your things you insist on, and some people have to insist that it's a guild on their server because they can't afford to server transfer, or they just don't want to. And that's just one of your things. Now, I'm going to talk about it as if server transfer is a thing, because it is for me. But at the same time, you know, the most of the process is sort of standard here. Now, as I say, the first step is to make your availability known. It's not to apply for a guild. That is the last step in the process. If the place to do, there's a few places to do this, but the place that's best to do this is WoW Progress. wowprogress.com. If you don't have an account on there, make one. Claim your character so that you can write things in the details, and then flag yourself as looking for a guild. Tick all the boxes, fill in all the things for how many nights you're prepared to do and all the rest of it. Write something suitable in the comments. It's always good to put things in the comments. Now, at the moment, I don't have my requirements in there. Whether I'll add them this weekend, I don't know. I don't think I will. But what I have added is my battle tag. I'm not saying you have to do that, but I like to do that because then people can approach me and get in contact with me. Now, and that is the reason for flagging, because effective recruitment teams in a guild will actually proactively go looking for you. I have done this as a recruitment officer. It's time consuming, but at the same time, it's much more effective than just waiting for applicants to come in, even if you're a good guild, because no matter how good a guild you are, unless you're at the very top, there's always someone better, and they may well be applying to those before they get to you. Whereas you might, if you go for them, might get them. So yeah, make yourself available. You never know. Someone who might not even be advertising for your class or spec might still show interest. Now, next, what you need to do is as I've said before, you must have this list on exactly what you want from a guild, because, and you need to be honest, you've got to be completely honest about it, and you've got to be honest about what are desirable features and focus on what you insist on. So there's no point in sacrificing something that means a lot to you just to get into a guild. It's a game, not a job, remember. Now, in my case, what I insist on is playing a Retribution Paladin in progress and completing content before the next content comes out. Those are my red lines. I would rather not raid at all and spend more time on the channel. I've not had much chance to spend that time to spend on that, than to end up in an unsuitable guild, because all that will happen is I will just get frustrated, because, you know, everyone makes mistakes, but if you're not playing with people on the same level of you, if you're, you know, if they're on a much lower level than you, the mistakes they made are going to be like baby mistakes, and you're just going to get so annoyed. You're going to get frustrated. That's not good. It's a game. You're supposed to have fun. It's a game. So there are some desirables, though. The desirable would be, for me, being Alliance. I prefer Alliance. I'm Horde at the moment. Being on a PvE server, clearing content at a good pace, rather than just simply getting it done just in time. Being with raiders that do casual PvE outside of raiding, because, you know, the old dungeons, especially this tier, this expansion, sorry, dungeons are now an actual thing. Not having toxic elements in the guild, participating in beta and PTR testing, and not having gnomes in the guild. All of those things are desirable, but I will sacrifice any and all of those in order to achieve my three essentials. And I would advise you to complete a similar list. You should then, with that, fashion a brief statement about yourself, your experiences, and what you're looking for. Be clear, but also be concise, because nobody wants to get crit by a wall of text. Then what you can do is post this on some recruitment forums. The official forums, the official World of Warcraft forums, has a looking for players in PvE type thing. If you are someone who needs to stay on your own realm, you could also, in addition, put it into your realm forum as well. You could post it in the recruitment section of the MMO champion forums towards the bottom. You could post it on Wowhead. They have some forums as well. There may be some others forums that you use. You could post in there too. In fact, Discord now, because there's like Discords for all sorts of things related to WoW. That's the big thing now. And all of the classes have their own dedicated Discord. And you could post it, like the Paladin one I know has a recruitment section there. So you could stick a little note in there, see what comes out of it. Now, even as clear as you are about what you're insisting on, you will still get responses from people that are not suitable for you. They will try it on. I've had this. I've had multiple of this. Now, I can't blame them for it. I'm not blaming them for it. They're not being stupid. They're actually being effective recruitment officers, because what they may think is that now is a really bad time for finding a new guild. It is. So they may be feeling that actually this person may be willing to take a big step down. And sometimes that will be true. So as I say, they're actually being effective in doing this. Why not? What have they got to lose? Nothing. Okay? In my case, I'm only going to drop down so far. Because think about it, if you like, I mean, I've had people from like 2 out of 7 mythic guilds. Now, what you think about it is, it's not just that it's 3 bosses back. That's not the big issue. The big issue is, you've got to think about it. Mythic's been out. We're into the 3rd reset of Mythic now. So if it took them 1 week to kill Nathendra, the first boss, and another week to kill Elaretha Renfrau, the second boss. Well, the second boss can be whatever you want, but that's the typical second boss. And they haven't killed Ursoc yet, so they'll probably kill Ursoc this week. And then you say to yourself, well, maybe they kill like dragons next. And even if they're only a 3-day raiding guild, which is possible, dragon next week. We're not even talking 1 week per boss, because when they get to Il'gynoth, that's going to take a couple of weeks on that rate of progress. When they get to CENARIUS, that's going to take a couple of weeks. And then another week for like Xavius. And then maybe an extra week just for wherever. The whole thing could take 10 weeks in total, which means another 8 weeks. Now, at that point, you're expecting Trials of Valor is going to be out. So in other words, that is a guild that's not going to clear it before the next content comes out. So it's as simple as that. They're not just, they might just about sneak it. So that's the reason why I wouldn't do that. And I wouldn't even do it just to keep my hand in, not because, I'm too elitist for it. It's not that. if it was between that or nothing, in theory I would do that, but in practice I know that I'm just going to be sat there, wipe after wipe after wipe, thinking, why have you just done that? You've just done that the last 10 times. Why are you still doing it? Now, I make mistakes. There'll be people I'm sure I've raided with that think the same thing about me, although I hope I haven't done the same bloody thing 10 times at least. But you know what I mean? But I would feel that about them, and it would be too much for me. No, I couldn't do it. I would snap. I would lose it. I'm normally quite calm and collected. I would not be in that situation because it would do my head in. Because, you know, even at 3 days a week, you put in so much in outside of the raid as well, put in so much preparation, so much commitment, and then you look at this person who's basically doing whatever they're doing, and they're thinking, so, and it's not going to be fun for them, for me moaning at them, is it? And it's not fun for me, and it's just, I'd be the toxic member of that guild. So yeah, no. Now, anyway, while you've put in these statements onto these different guilds, and as I say, you do sometimes, you will get approaches, potentially approaches. You'll certainly get people replying on these forum posts. If they're not suitable, they're not suitable. Sometimes people approach you and whisper you. I had one actually. It's actually, this sort of tells you the sort of state how bad it is at the moment. The last time I was looking for a guild, I had a number of people approach me, quite a few. Quite nice actually. This time I've basically had one. I've had 3 people bizarrely give me a friend request, but only one of them's actually bothered to talk to me. But one of them did talk to me, and it's quite funny actually, because I compare it to when I was a recruitment officer. Now, if I was a recruitment officer and I contacted someone, if I was able to get their battle tag and contact them, as soon as they came online, I would just check that, you know, because when someone comes online straight away, they might have gone AFK. But I'd obviously check that they're not in a raid or anything, or in a dungeon or something. But if they looked like they were idle in a city or at that time in their garrison, I would just whisper and say, hello, have you got time to talk? Something like that. Straight away. I'd be keeping my eye on them. So this guy whispered me. He whispered me hours afterwards, and I was just in Dalaran. I wasn't doing anything. And he wasn't either. I was checking. It wasn't their raid night, and he was indeed just idling in Dalaran. So I thought, okay, so straight away, that's a little bit of a sign that they're not that bothered. And then the second thing was, they didn't say, hello, have you got time to talk or anything like that. He just spammed me this copy-pasted message that told me nothing, because I already knew it. Because before I'd accepted the friend request, I'd Googled their battle tag, and sure enough, because they're they're a vaguely sensible recruitment officer, probably quite sensible, I'm actually mean there, they've put their battle tag into their own WoW Progress Guild area. And so I already knew about the guild. I knew what their progress was. What I didn't know was what their roster's like. That you can sometimes read incorrect information there. So I like to get that from the lion's mouth, so to speak. Unless it's on their, some websites have their roster on it. So I said hi back to him anyway. And he said nothing for like 2 minutes. It's like apparently just copy and pasting this thing was enough. I thought, okay. For a couple of minutes I thought, well, I'd better say something then. So I said, what's your roster like? And he copied and pasted a link again. It didn't say anything to me at all. Up until this point, he did, wait a minute. And it was to a Google Docs of their roster, you know, just like any organised guild would have. I looked at it, and there's 29 people there. Well, that's as many as we've got in the guild I'm in now. I said, no, that's way too big. It's far too big. And he said, yeah, but we've only got 6 melee. And I thought, well, actually, if 6 melee is pretty much what you'd want, you don't really want more than that. You can afford more than that. You don't want more than that. And I said, but you've got so many people. It doesn't matter about how many melee you've got. You've got a massive roster. He says, yeah, but we've got 6 healers and 15 ranged. As if to tell me, well, it's not as bad being melee as ranged because we've got even more overbloated in range. I thought, you're not getting this, mate. You're asking me to pay 200 quid to transfer to your realm and just move from one bench to another. And he says, benching's part of raiding. You should know that as a rep paladin. And I was thinking, oh, this particular rep paladin, until the end of Hellfire Citadel, which is the last tier, had never seen the bench. Don't tell me it's a part of raiding. Might be a part of raiding at a high level for me, but yeah. No, it's not. So anyway, I politely, I wasn't sarcastic like I've just been now. I would politely declined. He seemed to get quite shirty though. He seemed quite, you know, affronted by that. I don't know why. But yeah, anyway. So at this point, you've put all your stuff out. You've made yourself available. Now you have to start thinking of applying, because you're not necessarily going to have people breaking your door down and getting you to their guild. You've put yourself out there. Maybe you'll get the odd approach. Maybe you won't. So now what you need to do is to think about the application process. Now, different guilds have their own application process. Some of them have a very inflexible web form. Some of them just basically say, write an application, put in the information that you think is relevant, which is actually better. But there are some common things. They will ask you why you want to join the guild. They will ask you to talk about your logs. They'll ask you to talk about other aspects of your class and role. They will ask you about your experiences. All of these sort of things you can start to be writing with before you've ever even looked at a guild. Then, while you're doing that, you need to then actually look at some guilds. And again, the same places where you make your availability known are the same places guilds make their availability known, and you can look them up. Again, WoW Progress is a really good, I say it's a really good one. It's the best one, is what I'll say. It could be a lot better. They could do with some more filters. There are a few things that you have to bear in mind when you're looking, like, because what you can do on WoW Progress is you can, on the front page, you'll see some little drop-down menus, you know, in terms of the guilds, and you can put in what faction you're looking for, how many days a week you're looking for, your particular class and spec in particular, and go with that. But bear in mind, you'll get a list of them. There are a few things to bear in mind. First of all, it won't filter out the different types of realms. So you'll get US, EU, you'll get everything in there. So it shows you the guild. You just mentally tune that out. But even then, when you click on them, bear a few things in mind. There's a lot of guilds that appear to be advertising for new players. They say, yeah, we're advertising for new players, and it might have a list of specs. So it might just say all classes, but then they say in their text bit, which you should always read, that they're not actively recruiting at all. Now, it doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't apply, because it might be that they got a place open for an exceptional player, but usually what that means is you're having to compete with someone there, and whether or not you get in will depend on a number of factors, not necessarily whether you can outperform them even, because you've got to remember they're the established player. You might still end up on the bench. So I judge any such thing as, yeah, you're not recruiting, even though you say you are. Another thing to say is that it is quite common for a lot of guilds to just say recruiting all classes. This is never true. This is never true. Usually if they do that, it means either they're bombing, they've got members leaving by the day and they're about to collapse, or they're just looking for a DPS. So what, again, you need to do is to read the text. What are they actually looking for? You sometimes see the thing saying looking for all classes, but then in the thing it says need a healer. Okay, great. And then the third thing is that often guilds don't keep their stuff up to date. It's worth their time to keep it up to date when they're actively recruiting, but when they're not, they just sort of leave it. They don't just sort of cancel it all and say we're not recruiting anymore. They just leave it dead. And it's, you know, so the key thing to take from all this is read the text really, really carefully. Also read when the last time it was updated was. If the last time it was updated was like a couple of weeks ago, or even I would say more than a week, it's out of date. Now, that doesn't mean to say you can think, well, they're not recruiting. What you'd probably want to do is to click a link to their website. There's usually going to be a link to their website. If they have a website, most at this level, at that particular level do. If it's more heroic or normal you're trying to get into, they are much less likely to have a website. They might, but there should be some contact information. Now, yeah, so the main learning point is read the text. That's really what's going to tell you, and their website if they have a website. Now, an effective recruitment team will make sure that their WoW Progress entry is up to date, accurate, and has battle tag context for appropriate officers. It might just be one, it might be several. However, a guild can still be an effective raid guild whilst having a poor recruitment strategy. So don't take the absence of any of those effective features to mean it's an unsuitable guild. It may not be at all. It might just be that none of the officers is a dedicated recruitment officer. It takes a lot of time. Maybe none of them have got the time or can be asked to do it. And that doesn't mean that the guild itself is unsuitable. Now, yeah, so remember, the guilds themselves will advertise in all the same places that you will. So check all the same places that you made yourself known. Now, when you've shortlisted a few guilds, now this is the point I'm not at yet. This is what I'm aiming to do this weekend. What I then do is check through their logs. Any organised guild will have logs. Some of them have them private. Now, there's a couple of potential reasons for this. If they're a very, very top guild, then they keep them private because they don't want others earwigging their strategies. However, anyone outside of the top 20 that does this is a bit questionable. But there is another potential reason, which is perfectly valid. I was in a guild where they did this, is sometimes a guild will keep them private on the progress logs because they don't want people whoring. It's basically their way of saying, you ain't going to get a rank on this fight even when we kill it, come what may. So don't bother whoring, because you're going to get nothing for it. It's not the best way from my point of view of doing it. But they will have logs, but you won't be able to see them externally. But if they do, and most do, I check through the logs. And what I check through, first of all, is I check the damage, is what for your particular role, is their output the same as you would do? In other words, do you think you'd compete with that guild? And if the answer is yes, and bear in mind the ones that are in on the kills are likely to be the core team. So if you can compete with those, then you're in reasonable shape. The next thing I do is I actually start to look at wipes of certain bosses that I know well. In particular bosses where there's the potential to pad at a time when you really should be disciplined and focusing on a priority target that has to die very, very quickly. And I will try and see if I can see examples of people not doing what they should. In other words, they're trying to pad their own damage or healing or whatever instead of doing what they should be doing. And if you see this repeated for a long time, it might be an indicator that either the raid leaders aren't looking at it, or maybe worse still, because I was in a guild where this happened, it's the raid leader that's the culprit. But in other words, that sort of behaviour isn't being picked up on, in which case, you've got to expect that sort of guild, regardless of the quality of the players, is going to progress much more slowly because of that. So yeah, once you've checked the logs and you've narrowed it down still further, you've got your short list of ones that you think, so far, without having to talk to anyone just yet, this is the ones I'll apply to. Then what you want to do is to contact them. At this point, you know a lot about the guild. You know as much as you can externally. Talk to someone from the guild. Don't apply yet. Talk to someone, chat about it, talk about what your requirements are. And if they feel at the end of it that it's worth your while applying, at that point apply. And this might be several days later. And that's the point, hopefully, I shall be at by the end of the weekend on Sunday. So there you go. That was quite a long one, quite a long one. But as always, I hope you found it interesting and potentially even the last part useful. I don't know. Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. Have you got any other tips? I'm in need of them. Put them down there. Put them in the comments below. But if you did enjoy, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with others that you think it might be useful for as well. And until next time, I'll see you later.